Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett ended the GOP argument on keeping Washington, D.C. safe. Congresswoman Crockett asserts that murder rates in the red states are higher than in the blue states. HappenJustNow Enjoy hearing your thoughts. Please leave comments. Thanks.
But since my colleagues feel the need to meddle in local affairs of D.C., then let's look at where there might be issues. To be clear, D.C. doesn't control most of its own post-arrest criminal justice system. Instead, the federal government administers most of it. So I have a few questions, yes or no, for you, Mayor Bowser. The federal government, not D.C., has the authority to prosecute nearly all crimes committed by adults under D.C. law.
That's correct.
The federal government appoints judges to the local D.C. courts.
That's correct.
The federal government has jurisdiction over community supervision and adults charged or convicted of D.C. crimes.
That's correct.
The federal government has jurisdiction over the incarceration of adults convicted of felonies under D.C. law.
Correct.
Lastly, Mayor Bowser, isn't the federal government responsible for parole and supervised release of people convicted of felonies under D.C. law?
Yes.
Thank you. The fact is, my Republican colleagues want to talk about keeping D.C. streets crime-free. They can't even keep the halls of Congress crime-free, because we gonna talk about this, because I got 24 seconds. My freshman colleague has just been indicted on 13 counts, 13 felony counts, right? But have they exhibited any courage to say, you know what, we will disallow this in our body. We will make sure that we expel this individual. They have not. So what I don't want to hear is that they care about crime, because if they did, they would start by cleaning up our own house and mind our own business instead of coming after D.C. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
Mayor Bowser, I wanted to ask you why it is that you think your city council is working so hard against you to ensure the safety of residents and visitors.
I think our city council is concerned about safety of residents and visitors. It won't surprise anybody that we have philosophical differences. My views on how to make the city safer are well known, and I believe that they were affirmed by voters last year in bringing me back for a third term. But I also think that Americans are having these discussions in cities and towns all across our country. And what I hear them telling me when I go to visit places, they're not really concerned about my city council or me, but they do want to make sure that Washington is working. And when I say that, I'm talking about federal Washington.
But my question is more so focusing right now in that I have constituents that come up, like some of my colleagues had mentioned, and they don't feel safe walking around. I didn't feel safe walking around. And when you had a fellow member of Congress that was brutally attacked by someone that had a criminal record that was obviously showing that this person was disturbed, and then you had the failure of prosecution for that. That, to me, does not signify a safe city. In fact, we're looking and we're seeing that sexual abuse offenses have increased over 48% in just 1 year's time frame from 2022 to 2023. My next question would be for you, Mr. Graves, just as a personal understanding. I understand you're married, yes?
I'm sorry, I missed a lot.
I understand that you're married?
Yes.
Okay, and you have children?
Yes.
So I would assume that you are against violence against women.
Yes, of course.
So my question for you is, there's been many concerns brought up by my colleagues that you have actively chosen to ignore certain cases, and as a result of that, it's impacting people that ultimately are relying on you to do your job in order to make them feel safe. In the instance of my colleague that was attacked, I mean, my goodness, she's coming downstairs from her apartment. You have a crazy man that goes in, has a criminal history, should have been locked up prior, and yet he wasn't. And I just want to know why, because I understand that if that was your wife or that was your child, I assume that you would have pressed charges. Would you have not?
So I understand the concern for the community and keeping all of our fellow community members safe. We are prosecuting the individual you're referencing.
But he had a track record, and he was allowed back on the streets, and those actions that were taken against him were clearly not done in a way that caused him to understand that he can no longer do that. This person was a disturbed individual. He should have been given a more harsher sentence. My question is would you have allowed that to happen if that was your wife or your child? Yes or no?
So I am...
Is it yes or no?
So it's not a yes or no
It
question.
is a yes or no because you have people that are directly being impacted and hurt by these people, and you're failing to do your job. Just like Representative Bigg had asked you for your perspective on a case where someone was obviously being charged with a more harsher sentence than they deserved, and yet you're sitting here trying to argue that when people clearly don't feel safe. People are arguing about statehood. Statehood, fine, if a city can actually manage cases, but the city can't even prosecute adolescents' cases. And that is your responsibility. So I'm not trying to be a jerk here, but what I am asking is for you to do your job and make people feel safe, especially those that are depending on you to do it when you see cases of, 48% increase in sexual assault cases. My goodness.
So
That's it. I've heard enough. Chairman, I yield my time.
Congresswoman,
Thank you.
Congresswoman, may I address your question about sexual abuse? I know the chief wants to talk about it.
We only have 26 seconds left, but
We do have a lot to say about that, and when time allows.
I will contact your office.
Thank you.
Lady yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I don't know that I can get through all that I need to say in 5 minutes, but I'm gonna do my best. We're gonna start off with sexual abuse. I am so excited that my colleagues across the aisle care about sexual abuse, considering that the front runner right now for presidency is kind of just been found liable of sexual abuse. So I'm excited because this may mean that finally some folk will back off from supporting him because we don't support sexual abusers in this chamber. So I'm happy about this. But let's talk about facts versus fiction. My Republican colleagues want to talk about being tough on crime and keeping criminals off the streets. And so we've talked about, let's talk about what is criminal. We've got members of Congress elected in other states, other cities, trying to subvert democracy and the will of the people of D.C. by dictating that the city act in a way the Republicans want because they think they know what's best. Republicans want to subvert the people's power, and it's not just for D.C., it's all over. We see this in states like Texas and North Carolina with gerrymandering. In fact, we still have members here who still think that Trump won in 2020. Republicans want to talk about crime and violence, but they don't want to admit their role in this crisis. The fact is that they still allow assault weapons in the hands of radical right extremists, which have forced families visiting a mall in my state of Texas to leave a mall with nothing more than trauma, hurt, and despair as a neo-Nazi terrorized them, and yet what did they have in their hand? Another AR-15, but we don't want to have a conversation about that. So if we're going to talk about crime and the reasons for the increase in them, we've got to talk about these root causes. Number one, the fact that we have elected legislators that won't do their job and protect people by keeping these weapons off the streets. That's number one. Number two, we are still reeling from a financial crisis, and guess what? They don't want to make it better. I'm sure they all campaigned and said, oh, we're going to help out the economy post-COVID. But right now we are on a cliff over the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling that was raised 3 times under Trump, and 25% of this credit card bill that they don't want to pay was accrued under Trump, and he only had 1 term. And hopefully he won't have no more. Nevertheless, I digress. Let me move on. So let's also talk about the fact that just recently, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, we received reports that there is a staff member who's working for a Republican on this committee who has ties with and supports a white nationalist who has proclaimed himself to be just like Hitler. I don't really know what to say, except for the fact that this is a farce, all right? Because the fact is, we've got an increase in crime all over. If we really want to be real about it, let's talk about it. We're talking about D.C. right now, but the murder rates in red states like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama have statistically exceeded those in blue states like Illinois, New Mexico, and Michigan every year since 2000.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Happen Just Now for more content about accountability of all public officials and policy and procedures.